Hello and welcome to this episode of Point-Counterpoint. We are here not in an excited mood, but in a very somber and dejected mood, because anybody who has some feelings for Goa is bound to hang their heads in shame because of whatever has happened, whatever we've witnessed in the last 7 to 10 days. We all know that before the last assembly elections, people turned around and felt that probably for the last time, one should allow the opposition space to breathe, and one placed an element of trust in the opposition space, mainly the Congress, thinking that the Congress party and its MLAs would go by the basic decency of democracy. I won't even say the rules of democracy, but basically the decency of democracy, and not to play around with the mandate. On the record, of course, at this point of time, nobody from the Congress has completely split, but their actions have completely exposed the inner workings of an absolute greed, and this is something that all of Goa knows. There is nobody in the Congress who can actually come forward with their heads held high and their honor intact, and look at you in the face and say, look, we would have never left the party, or whatever has happened is just a rumor, or it's a media trial balloon which the media is floating. All of that is completely false. What is true is that the elephant in the room, the elephant of defections and deceit and treachery, has consumed the entire room, as it were, and we keep on saying this. And we've already had a debate on this 3 days ago. But why are we here now? We are here now to not just to discuss what happened and why did the Congress get to this stage, but look at the larger issue of opposition politics and how the opposition space is completely getting consumed by the ruling space. And we are at a stage, not just in Goa, but in other parts of the country, where the opposition is slowly becoming weak and may soon become a thing of the past, leading to absolute anarchy if that actually happens. Our country was not meant to be this way. All along, there have been fragments in our society. All along, there have been differences. Immediately after partition, let us not believe that India was completely united. There were these princely states. People owed loyalty to the princely states. There were different regional satraps. People owed their loyalty to different satraps. We all know that there were differences between Gandhi and Nehru themselves. We all know that Subhash Chandra Bose was an outlier in the whole system. But there was one thing that drew all of them together. They were all keen, and they were all believed in holding India together. They had different paths, but the goal was always the same. They held India together. And India thrived because of its differences. India thrived because of opposition. And that's the way our country has always been. But we are now at a stage when there is no holding together. And this is going to really impact not only our democracy, our polity, but our social fabric, which is sadly getting completely taken away. I've spoken enough. I will introduce my very esteemed panelist, who probably know much more than I do, with their insights and detailing which they'll bring to this whole discussion. First, Thomasin Bab Cardoz. He needs no introduction. Former Speaker of the Goa Assembly, but a very important voice in Goan politics, also a scholar, an author, writer, columnist. Welcome, Thomasin Bab. Next to him, of course, is Professor Prajal Sakardande, another person who, of course, needs no introduction, scholar, historian, heritage activist, and so on and so forth. But above all, like all of them, a Goan at heart, whose heart bleeds as we speak right now. And last, our esteemed friend and colleague, Dr. Manoj Kamath, the principal of the Mallikarjun College, and he's been very vocal on many of these issues, and his articulation and insight will obviously lend weight to this debate. I will start with Thomasin Bab. Thomasin Bab, if you could just reflect a little bit on what we've said. I don't have a specific question. Since it's a conversation, I just leave the floor to you.
See, the way you have started, you have put it very well. And the most important thing, as you have said, that opposition parties, not only in Goa, but throughout the country, is getting day by day weaker and weaker. And it is because, first of all, the ruling party is in a position to attract the opposition candidate, opposition MLAs and this, because they have that power. They have money power, and with the help of the money power, this is what is happening. That is what it appears to me. But one thing is sure, opposition in a democracy is a must. Not only opposition, it should be strong opposition, so that our democracy survive in a better way in future. But unfortunately, these days it is not happening. Of course, Goa is, I think everybody, as you said, were feeling that now at least the opposition in Goa will be strong, united, they will fight for the people and all. But the recent happenings,
Yes.
what you have said,
Yes.
has really put Goans into shame. And I think we should reflect on this and how we can go ahead for a better democracy, for a better understanding, and for the betterment of our state, Goa.
Prajalbab, the opposition space we all know is crumbling and getting weaker and weaker. We understand the whole shenanigans of defection politics and deals and other things that happen. That is extremely well known. But the point is that if you can just reflect on what the dispensation is attempting to do, in the sense that dispensation is making itself more powerful because the opposite party is weak. But when this ultimately happens, what happens to our polity and our society and the way Goa is structured? What happens to that system?
Sujay Bab, it's really appalling that since as a student of history I would like to reflect on this. We had an assembly in 1964 to 66 where the opposition, they were like lions that thundered in the assembly halls and they roared at each other. Like, for example, Dr. Jack Sikera, the first leader of opposition, they used to attack every issue raised by the government, and fair enough, they used to question the fact that that word opposition itself, it is becoming extinct now. This is, and even in later times you have Manohar Parrikar, where all the Goans looked up to him, and people were looking forward to the opposition. Even when they were watching the TV or they were reading the print media, people were looking more for the opposition during the assembly sessions. And now we have come to a stage where there would be no opposition. What is this horse trading? What is this happening in Goa? And this is something very, very demoralizing as a voter, and it is very demoralizing as a citizen of Goa.
We'll come back to this. Dr. Kamath, see, taking off from where Prajal left off. See, the word opposition itself, if you break it down linguistically, it means opposite opposition. That exactly what the opposition is. And there is no space right now to take a opposite position. See, for instance, in Goa, there are so many issues being discussed. But the real issues, for instance, there is no opposition to so many things that the ruling dispensation is doing or not doing, or at least there should be a debate. For instance, if we look at, has there been enough discussion on, say, flood relief? Has there been enough discussion on farmer distress? Has there been enough discussion on the economy, for instance? Has there been enough discussion on the social fabric, where a lot of people say, look, for the first time we feel our social fabric needs to be better protected. So if you could just dwell a little bit on this absolute lack of a position by the opposition, essentially highlighting subjects which are very dear to people's hearts.
What you said, this entire subject under the under our lenses and on the table of our debate sends shivers down my spine. And I believe that this must be the case for every nationalist, one who thinks about Goa, one who thinks about national interest. One thing we have seen, Sujay Bab, not only in Goa but all over India, across all states, the opposition space is shrinking and the ruling space is growing. I don't mind if the ruling space grows on its own, if it is a natural organic growth. In a sense, you get elected and then let people 80% or 90% or say 100% have trust in you, and then you get elected and you do what you want. But it is not the case. We have seen after elections, the ruling dispensation is growing beyond its bounds and the opposition space is shrinking. I see an agenda here.
Right.
And the agenda is deep, and then you can really understand the agenda deep down. What is it? That we do not want to hear criticism.
Right.
We don't want to hear an opposite voice.
Right.
We want to tow our own agenda. And then every opposition which comes on our way, every statement or every particular person who comes in our way, we want to demolish it.
Right.
And that is the kind of attitude which is growing. Whether it is you call it saffronization, or you call it Hindu Rashtra, or whatever name you say. The idea is to demolish every particular institution which has a secular fabric. The idea is to come up with your own agenda, and those people, those institutions which do not tow your own agenda, they have to be demolished and they have no space. That is the kind of mentality which is growing, which is more agonizing to me, which I feel more troubled about it. If you look at Goa, Goa has always been an hodgepodge. It has been a laboratory for all these bad things in politics. It has been a laboratory for defections.
Right.
And then here we have seen, or here we were at least expecting that Congress has learned its lessons, and the ruling party who is now into ruling is has not come on in that particular space on its own. Here we had a fragmented opposition even before elections, and we have further fragmented opposition now. So here I see here is a complete attempt to demolish the opposition space by hook or by crook. And the experiments what we have seen recently, which has been a failed experiment as of now, but be sure in coming days we will have to face it, and we will have to again bring it on table for discussion. So I think here the problem is with the attitude, the problem is with the thinking of the ruling, that we need no opposition, and then opposition should not exist at all.
There's an interesting thought I had. I thought I'll place it on the table. You see, there was a Turkish-American economist called Timur Kuran. Okay, he propounded the theory. He's still existing and a very well-known economist. He propounded this theory called preference falsification. Now, the theory actually means that you give preference to certain wants that are not really your wants, but under social pressure, which actually means that, for instance, right now we have a huge amount of social pressure towards being on one side of the debate.
Correct.
Okay, it could be right or the left. We all know which side we are talking about. Okay, now what happens is there are large number of people who are also kind of I won't use the word liberal. I'll use the word democratic, who believed in democratic institutions. Now, since the preference falsification is so much towards one side of belief, that the other side, okay, actually says that, look, if the majority is thinking in this kind of a manner, then let us keep quiet. You surrender to the majoritism. But my issue is, this is not about, say, BJP or Congress or whatever, but the mindset of people is that if you perceive that the majority of the population is moving towards that side, that's a preference falsification. And what you do is, then the people who can oppose it or counter it or create the counter ripple, they become silent. So what I do is I see a lot of this happening even within the opposition space. The opposition here perceives that the whole steam engine or the electric engine which is rolling past, the powerful steam engine of politics, which is on one side, it has completely taken over the political space. Hence, there is no space or no opportunity for the opposition to play a role. So, to be relevant, they are surrendering. That is one theory. I just kind of placed it on the table for all of you to react to this. Some of you first.
See, what you have said is right. The ruling dispensation,
yes,
as we all know, is very strong.
Yes.
In every sense of the word.
Yes.
And that is the reason why all this is happening.
Yes.
7-8 years back, there was a call that India should be Mukt Congress. And if you see, I think the ruling dispensation is going in that direction. By 2024 elections, they might be requiring that throughout India there won't be any Congress at all. Now, if you observe, practically in all the states wherever Congress is ruling, there is attack on them. ED, all those
Yes.
institutions, CBI, everything is
Agency arsenal.
Agency, yeah. Everything is being used to dismantle whatever little Congress is having. And as you have said, because one side has become stronger,
Or
others,
perceived to be.
perceived to be,
Yes.
what they do is, okay, we will also go that side so that we are also safe. Although they are, just doing a great injustice to the people who have voted for them. And this is exactly what is happening in Goa. When I ask few people why this so and so has to do this, they say because there must be having something, either it is money power, or they must be having something wrong in their cupboards, so they are afraid of ED, CBI and other agencies, and that is the reason why it is going in that way. But there was a time politics was being run based on ideology. Today,
Yeah,
it
please
is-
dwell on this. I'd like you to, because you're from that space. Tell us a
today-
little bit about your times and how the opposition played a
today
role in
there
this.
is no ideology at all, and that is the reason why I remember during when Goa was having two major parties like Maharashtra Gamantak Party and United Goans.
Yes.
I have seen people saying, no, we will die for this party, but we will never go on the other side. Both sides it was happening. And one thing I must say, during that time, although there were two contesting this thing, the leaders of that time were much better than what we are having today. They were sincere, they were ethically bound so as to do justice to their people, which is not happening today. Today, as you said, we give our word to the Lord, and then we misuse the same because of either of money or some other power. So therefore, today's politics, what I find, in times to come, opposition will be reduced to nothing. And that will be the biggest danger for democracy, because as you have said, that will create a sort of anarchy, and our secular politics will never be there. So for that, whatever is left today, I think all opposition parties must unite so as to preserve the secular fabric of India.
I would also like to make one point here and ask Prajal Bab to respond to that. See, we speak about secular politics. Undoubtedly, there can be no argument with that. There's no debate on this. However, I feel right at this point of time the danger is beyond secularism and communalism. These are time-tested theories. They are very much in existence. There's erosion of one, and there's a explosion of the other. That we know, and we've discussed this very often. Beyond secularism or communalism, I think the issue that we need to address is ethics and ethical politics, because ethical politics goes beyond communal politics or secular politics. And what is now happening is that the space for ethical politics is completely shrinking. As Thomasin Bab said, there were two major parties then. They obviously had huge differences, but there was a ribbon of decency which wrapped the polity together. Now that ribbon of decency has gone primarily because ethics has become something which people are chucking into the dustbin, as it were. Okay. Now the issue is when ethics has become garbage, and has the same space that the garbage has in the Sonsoro dump, then what do you do? And the point is, and this whole issue of ethics should not be restricted only to MLAs or political parties. I think the scanner should also go to the entire polity of people who are repeatedly electing certain people irrespective of the ethical misdemeanors that they do, or the sides that they take. Ultimately, they hang themselves by the coattails of politicians, who ultimately are a reflection of what our society is. Your thoughts, please.
It is like speaking lies to the gods. There's a video that has gone viral where all these opposition cadres are speaking lies to the gods, where they invoke the blessings of the gods, and they will say they would never defect.
Correct.
And defections galore. Of course, there were defections earlier also.
Correct.
But this is the pits. We have reached the, I think, pinnacle of the garbage-like situation. And this is all overnight horse trading that is going on, and the lure of power and money. Like, it is not about who is left, who is right, who is center of the left. It's not about that. This is crossing all limits of decency, as you have said, and finally it also boils down to we repeatedly electing the same people when we know that these are the very people who have stabbed us in the back in the past. They have defected, they have changed parties overnight. All that is done, people know about it, yet people will repeatedly. Now in the another 5 years, we will have the same people.
Right.
Because we have been having the same people. It is not that the people are gullible. People know. People know. So it is not about the vulnerability of the people. The people are aware of all these things. Yet I do not know. It's kind of that how they pay obeisance to that particular politicians because they have something to gain from it, and so they don't mind that person indulge in any kind of trade overnight and change sides. So this is something which is shocking, and through this medium I would like to convey to all the people of Goa that I don't know whether to give a wake-up call or what, because we have given wake-up call as activists numerous times. There was a movement called Goa Bachao Abhiyan.
Yes.
Now again we have to do Goa Bachao Abhiyan from these politicians.
Dr. Kamath, I was about to ask you a different question, but Prajal's interesting point has made me switch a little bit. See, the issue is, amidst all this gloom and doom, the only glimmer of hope that one finds, at least, is not from political parties but the people. While we criticize the polity and what it has become, we also have a large section of people who is at least holding it together and holding that candle in the darkness. The issue, and not just in Goa, I mean, if you see the CAA protests, if you see the farmers' protests, you see so many actions which has led to the government at least kind of recognizing it in some way or the other, albeit reluctantly. And it happened even during the Congress time. Okay. So the issue is that people's opposition also seems to be the only hope at this point of time. And so if you could just dwell a little bit on people's opposition, and even perhaps the opposition role which is kind of played by free thinkers, by people in that space, students, young people, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, if you now look at, the only hope is people.
Right.
Because you have seen that the political parties are gullible, the politicians are gullible, and then that they change their colors as they change their clothes.
Correct.
This has happened in Goa, this has also happened in Maharashtra.
Right.
But you see, I can really show you both the sides of the picture.
Right.
When defections happened in Maharashtra, we never expected that defections would happen to a party like Shiv Sena, where people are hot-headed and then the Karyakartas are with stones in their hands.
Right.
We know how the Shiv Sena emerged and what was the ideology.
Right.
Shiv Sena is also an cadre-based party in that sense, because it was a cadre, reflected in its ideology and also their top boss.
Sure.
When such a big operation happens in Shiv Sena, what did we expect? We expected ruckus on the streets. We expected that people revolting against those 50-odd, 40-odd people, but nothing of that sort happened. Why is it so? Because people have understood where the power is. People have understood that my leader has become powerless and there is another power center which is emerging. Same thing which is happening in Congress. Why Congress, once upon a time a ruling party, a strong opposition, has suddenly realized that we are powerless and then we need to get off on the other side of the fence, in the other boat? It's because they feel that the leader has become powerless. So it is trickling down from the top. So we say right from Delhi to Gully, from Delhi to Goa, we say there is no one hating or no one worth hating a particular party which is in dooms. And then nobody is ready to take that risk. When you have no trust in your own leader, now look at it, it is just 100 days over. that the elections have taken place, Michael Lobo, a person of that particular caliber who could get 3 to 4 MLAs elected, shifted sides with an expectation that this party would come into power. What happened then? Only because of Michael, Congress could save its face, because they got at least 3 to 4 MLAs and there was some uproar at North Goa. We have seen otherwise South Goa was silent. Michael was being selectively targeted subsequently by the dispensation. What Michael expected, or what people from Congress expected, is some kind of hope or some kind of support from the center. We should have seen congressmen coming to protect him, coming to address what is happening, because that selective targeting was anyway
we are not going to the legality or otherwise of his actions or whatever.
Absolutely. So what I'm trying to say is,
from the political point of view,
point of view, I'm trying to tell you is, once you know that you have no captain for your ship, something like this happens. What happened in Goa is similar to what happened for Shiv Sena in Maharashtra.
But Dr. Kamath, I agree with you completely, but I think the reason is also beyond that. No captain for the ship is certainly an important reason. But I think that somewhere down the line, whether there is a captain or no captain, I think Goa and many other small states the politicians do not look at politics as a mission anymore. It is a hardcore deal making profession. They all want their 25, 30 crores. I'm being very modest and economical here, but I'll say 25, 30, 40 crores in the bank to start with. They essentially want a fixed deposit so that their lives are completely settled.
Right.
I think that has become a much more important thing than anything else. And I think that is where the danger is. That when it no longer becomes a mission, it becomes a hardcore business. If that happens, then that is something which is going to affect everybody. And let us, before we go for a short break, let us make no mistake that here one is not feeling sorry for either of the two major parties, or nor are we defending either of the two parties, or not even saying that this party is okay and this party is not. What one is saying is that the opposition space, when it goes, it will impact the BJP and the Congress equally. Can you imagine that, if the Congress were to be ruling and there was no BJP, that would be equally dangerous.
Correct.
Right.
Of course, one is not saying that there should be a Congress Mukt Bharat.
No.
There should not be a BJP Mukt Bharat or any opposition Mukt Bharat also.
Right.
Correct.
It's about the.
So the issue here is this, that the opposition
space has to
space is an opposition space, irrespective of which party occupies it.
Yes.
The dangers to our polity, our society, and the country at large, if the opposition space is completely eroded, and if we have an India without any opposition parties or space. But what happens is that in every society, unless you have checks and balances, and you need checks, at the same time you need balances, you need counter ripples to narratives, to conversations, to decisions. And the point here is that when you do not have an opposition space and the anarchy persists, then you have the ruling party, whether it's the Congress or the BJP, which can literally kind of do as it wants. It can steamroll, it can bring about legislation, it can bring about bills. See, for instance, if you notice, the Major Ports Authority bill, which has obviously had a lot of opposition from the Goan space, and I would put my hand out and say that, Herald as a newspaper played a frontal role in this. One normally doesn't speak so openly about these things, but essentially the fact that it needed newspapers and needed publications to rise up and basically bring to light on the dangers of for instance, the whole National Waterways Act and the Ports Authority bill, and many things like this. I'll start with Dr. Kamath. You see, the thing is, when there is no opposition space among the political parties, where does that opposition come from?
Yeah, currently the opposition is only coming from the media. And then there are good newspapers and there are bad newspapers as well. But then even the minority, that voice counts. And then when people know that you speak the truth, like Herald has continuously and consistently done that, and let me say it very openly on this platform. When you continuously speak the truth, people tend to believe you, and then your numbers that time don't matter. This is what has happened. So we have seen some part of the print media, some part of the electronic media, some journalists speaking out the truth always. And that has created a kind of a ripple. The recent agitation, the Anganwadi,
That's right.
And we have seen it has come to a quick end, but the end was not so quick in that sense. Only because there was assembly, and then the point was raised there. They did not want it to escalate further, so they put a break.
Right.
But it took 50 odd days, and we haven't seen any particular political party being there day in and day out, except for one or two newspapers. Herald was one of them. So here I'm not just pointing out to Herald and the good work done by them, but what I'm trying to say is, other than the media or other than some sections of the society who has that kind of potential to sustain. We have seen that potential to sustain in case of farmers agitation.
Absolutely correct.
It went on for years together, but CAA was we were unable to sustain the CAA kind of an agitation. What I feel is, when it hurts people, when it hurts their stomach, when it hurts their livelihood, when their life is in danger, people tend to speak out. But then if you really look at for everything which happens, whether it concerns the society or the economy, first, people are not educated. People need to be informed, and once people are convinced that this is going to affect their life or livelihood or threaten their entire existence, they come on streets and they continue the agitation till the end, till it's and the fate is accomplished. Here I see currently, even though the opposition space has disseminated, some sections of media, some sections of intellectuals have continuously held a baton, and that is the ray of the hope for people.
Prajal Bab, see, the thing is, again, the media plays its role. There's no doubt about it, as Dr. Kamath has spoken, and it will continue to play its role. The question that I have is that until and unless, see, the response from political parties is okay, they will sustain the pressure up to a point, and they will either give in temporarily because there's an assembly session or not. There could be various reasons. But the issue is that ultimately that opposition voice has to be heard in the assembly. The media cannot go and sit there in the assembly, inside the assembly. They can report from outside. Now, do you feel the time has come to have a different kind of a political kind of a system or a political dispensation where good people, activists, others, they can actually look forward to presenting an electoral alternative to the people? And while we romanticize about it, every election one thinks about it, one feels that this can happen, smaller parties come up, but the hard reality, and the reality can be for various reasons, is that it does not really happen. So the point is, what is the reason why that is not happening? Because the opposition space need not necessarily always be called the Congress space or any other party space. The opposition space is the people's space. But why is the people's space getting the political representation it deserves?
The people's space is getting the political representation it deserves because the people are finally the voters. It is finally we who bring them to power. And what has been observed is, of course, there have been various issues where the people have come out on the streets, and whether it is anti-SEZ Andolan or Goa Bachao, people have come out on the street. But of late, a new kind of a media built up has happened, wherein you are dubbed as an anti-national, to neutralize that people's opposition. So, and you find a lot of people, towing that particular hype that is created, and they feel, oh, that is the right thing, and okay, there can be no opposition, there cannot be. It is not about Congress or BJP or whatever. It is not about Congress.
Right.
Actually, here the focus is not on Congress
Correct.
as an opposition. It is opposition.
Right.
In a democracy, one needs an opposition,
Right.
irrespective of whatever party it is. So, but we also, some people try to bracket opposition meaning you are talking about Congress. So you are a Congressee, you are a pro-Congress. It is not that. We are not talking about that.
Right.
We are talking about a sustained opposition from the political cadres and also from the people. The people's opposition is there in Goa, but then what happens is when it doesn't get translated into votes, I feel, because finally whatever the result is that the activists are neutralized who are fighting for a cause, and you have certain people coming to the voting for the same people, and the same people coming repeatedly coming to power, and another 5 years the same story will be repeated.
Kamaldev, switching track and coming to certain historical hard realities of Goa. while we say all this, the irony also is that you have closely witnessed Goan politics and what really happened in that decade from 1990 to 2000. Okay, Goa is known as a basket case of Indian politics, and many of the politicians who we kind of revere and who have some kind of following, you have say Dr. Vili, you have Ravi Nayak, you have Luis Prot Barbos, even Sardin for a little while, and then Manohar Parrikar. All of them have attained some kind of path through the defection route. So if you can just kindly elaborate on the fact that in Goa, the other question, somebody listening to this debate and thinking that what we are saying is completely wrong. I mean, suppose there is an opposition to this debate, suppose there is a counter debate to this debate. Okay, the counter debate would throw back at us and say that, you know, what you all are talking is absolute rubbish, because Goa has always been like that. This is not something new. So why are you all so surprised? Yeah. So if you can just elaborate a little bit on this, that this has always happened, pulling down of governments, defections happening, Sardin going to Australia as chief minister and returning as ex-chief minister. Luis Prot Barbos was probably the only speaker who defected, correct? Yeah. So if you can just elaborate on this and then say and answer this. I mean, suppose I was in your opposition, and I would say all this is what you're saying doesn't hold any water, because it has been happening for a long time. So why are you blaming the present generation?
In fact, historically, if you see after the 1961,
yes,
when first election took place somewhere in 1963, I believe,
Yes.
Dayanand Banarkar became the chief minister.
Yes, yes.
Now, there was no opposition for him
Right.
to become the chief minister. But the opposition under Judge Sequeira, it was equally strong.
Right.
And therefore, whatever they were doing on the floor of the house, it was for the betterment of the people of Goa.
That's right.
Be it MGP or UGP. Then next again Banodkar came for some time. I think in 74 he expired.
73.
73 he expired. His daughter took over. Even that time the politics of Goa was not as bad as it is now. There were here and there little drawbacks, but still it could be understood. Although there was strong opposition for the merger of Goa into Maharashtra or making Marathi as the official language of Goa, yet people of Goa lived a harmonious life without any problems as far as the political effect is concerned. But in 1979 elections, Congress government came, and somewhere in the beginning of 1980, and Pratap Singh Rane became the chief minister. It was a good government without any this thing. Second time Mr. Rane became the chief minister. Little something were happening here and there, but without much effect. Third time, and the first defection that took place when Churchill Alemao with Ramakant Khalap formed a PDF government.
Yes.
And from that day, I think,
Right.
the Goa's political atmosphere was vitiated. And from that day, it was well-known fact that people could buy the MLAs. MLAs could make the money by even not thinking what the people, their followers, their voters will think
That
about.
forbidden apple was bitten.
Beaten.
I always
But there is an
feel-
interesting thing here, you know,
Yes.
there is a change of trend
Yes.
of the defections which happened then and now defections which were happening early,
Right.
are happening now. In last 5 years we have seen whatever defections have happened is not to get power, not to become the chief minister.
Yes.
The Tomazin Bab is telling us stories, and they are indeed very historical accounts, because sir has witnessed it. Is where people defected to get into power to become the chief minister. Now people want to defect to earn the spoils,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
not to get any post.
No, I will give you one example. During the first government of Banodkar, 4 or 5 people of his, wanted to throw him down, Lard and company. And when he got that smell that this is going to happen, I remember my MLA even, he purchased my MLA also from Kalangut constituency, the Mr. Valen Sikvera, and another 4, and saw that nothing happens
Yeah,
to his
it was
government.
neutralized.
It was neutralized. But one thing, as I told you, they must have been given money, but nobody went to become the chief minister, or nobody went to become ministers the way now it is happening.
And that was also opposition to the cult of Banur, the person, not defecting from party.
yeah, yeah.
But I always feel that 27 March 1990 is the darkest chapter in Goa's democratic system and political history. Because that's where everything started, when this first, they defected from and formed a own PDF government, throwing off the democratic elected government. And that was the first, and that started that trend, and then real estate lobbies and all kinds of things started
And,
coming.
no, and secondly, what happened to that PDF government?
Yeah.
For the first time, the two opposite ideologies came together.
Right, right.
Which could not be
Marriage of convenience kind of.
continued, because finally that was the beginning of destroying our ideologies, our say in the matter as far as those issues, certain issues were concerned. So I feel politics of that time was much better than the politics of present day. Now present day, as he said, it is because of money or because of some power, political power, or in order to avoid action against the wrong things.
Against the skeletons in the cupboard.
That was
The
so
scams to hide
these are
the
the 3 main reasons what is happening today. But as we said, I feel today's voter also is equally responsible.
Right,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah, it is not only the MLA who is corrupt, today the voter
Voter
also
is equally corrupt.
And that is the reason why, as we say again and again, same faces are being elected. They are changing parties after parties, yet people vote for them. So this whole thing, and practically in Goa mostly, what is happening is very dangerous.
They openly fool the people.
And in the last election, I was surprised when Naveli went to BJP. Naveli constituency. The constituency which has got about 24,000 votes, hardly 6,500 BJP votes, yet the BJP wins there. So this shows how the voter has changed its attitude. He is not at all worried what the others will say. If I am getting something good, I am benefited, I go after
Not
that.
about Goa, but about self.
It's
Self
about
gain.
self.
There is another trend here.
Yes.
Earlier people were talking about development
Right.
of their constituency. Now they are only talking about infrastructure development. For development means infrastructure for them. And through route of infrastructure development, it is self-development. But when we are talking about not electing the same faces, and the same old faces are involved in defections, in this current episode of Congress getting into hands with the BJP and then trying to change their parties, out of those 6 MLAs, 4 are new MLAs.
Yeah.
4 are
Yeah,
first
that's a
time
very
MLAs.
important point. Yes.
4 are first
They've just
timers.
begun their political career. as
They have
well.
just begun their political career, and yet they aren't worried. And the worst part is even the MLA from that of Kurtorim constituency, which happens to be a bastion of Congress otherwise.
Yeah.
Correct.
At the Nuhe constituency.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what have you seen? Even at Kunkolim, the last
right,
MLA.
that's right, correct,
So
correct.
people are not worried even of their political future.
yeah.
What really matters is what will I get as of now.
At the moment.
At this moment.
What are the
And now the
names?
only reason why this merger has fizzled out is only because people did not get something on their table at this moment. So now it's only greed of convenience. Now it is greed of what is coming to me and coming to me alone. It is not about my constituency. It is not about my people.
Correct.
And ensuring a secure political and financial
But
position.
tell us.
Then
Yeah,
Apa.
what
Then
happens? Another very disturbing trend that is come in the political aspect of Goa. See, I also contested. We never gave any money to the voter.
Right.
But today, when you go to a house, you keep 2,000 or 4,000 note like this. And when you go, you shake hand with him and leave those 2,000.
Along with your manifesto. So manifesto has become an envelope.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, the people also have become so
But then
greedy.
they also say he gave more than
Yeah, that is also
so
there.
That envelope also has to have weight.
Yeah,
It's not,
yeah.
just,
And according to the number of this thing.
It
So
should be heavy.
one a funny example, but it is a good example. In Salset, the MLA was going house to house for canvassing. Nobody was in the house, but a small child was inside. So when he saw the child from inside is saying, "Bol Allah jale bitor sor." In other words, if you have brought the ball, then you come inside. See the mentality of the child. Where we have reached, where elders are asking for money, and he is asking for the money only, but in some
kind.
other kind.
It's a metaphor.
So
In
that-
fact, people look forward to these
Yeah,
elections that they could make.
But tell us, see, the thing is now these are disturbing trends. The point is, what does this translate into? What it translates into, to my mind, is that this whole debate that we are having of there being no opposition space. The point is, if our system has become in this kind of a manner, then the lines, what we are now realizing is the lines between the ruling space and the opposition space is blurring.
Correct.
The issue that who do we call ruling and who do we call opposition? So the whole concept of opposition space itself is going, rather than we saying opposition space is going, but we need to turn around and ask whether these terms will actually matter or not matter. So I think the reality is much more serious than what we are actually saying now, because if this transactional politics becomes the order of the day, then every tenet of our constitution goes to the dogs, literally.
True. And it becomes a personal transaction.
Yes.
And then now we have leaders where people say very proudly, "To khancha ticket chara to jiko neta." It doesn't matter.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
true. Correct.
yeah,
Correct. Correct.
That is much more disturbing.
Yeah.
So then why you don't require a manifesto, you don't require an ideology, you
So
don't require a flag.
that person doesn't have any this for diffidence.
Correct.
He knows that he's going to win
He's going to
irrespective
win,
of
irrespective of
whichever
whichever
party
party.
will join. So it
See,
is,
because what happens is, see, for instance, if you talk to any of the Congress MLAs, I'll take Congress first.
Right.
If you sit down with any of them and ask them about the ideology of the Congress, the ancestors of the Congress party, the founding fathers of the, I don't even think anybody will even take the name of Dadabhai Naoroji.
Yeah.
True.
they would not know.
They
at
will
all.
not know. My issue, you ask any of the Congress MLAs, barring a couple of senior ones,
Yeah.
if you ask even the other ones who've been former ministers,
Yeah.
if you talk to them and ask them who Dadabhai Naoroji is, they will not even respond about it. Similarly, the people who are now BJP MLAs or who defected from the Congress and went to the BJP, if you ask them about the fundamentals of RSS, the founders of RSS, the entire chain of command,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth, I don't think if you talk to, for instance, I will not take names because one would like to insult anybody, but if you even talk to former ministers and high-ranking officials, ministers of the BJP who've been in Goa, if you ask them even who Din Dayal Upadhyaya is, they will fumble.
True.
So
Yeah.
my issue is it works both ways.
Correct.
Yeah, both
So
ways,
so that obviously means that party and party ideology means
Doesn't
absolutely nothing.
doesn't count anymore.
Before we end, I think we are running out of time. A quick last segment on what do you feel could be the slight ray of hope and the change that one can make within our polity and society to see that there is at least some kind of a resistance to this downfall.
Education, activism, and intellectual inputs to people. Educate them, tell them about what is good, and only few people could do it, and then you can do it honestly. The media will have a big role to play because you are not only to educate, you have double roles, not only to educate people but also to cut the wrong propaganda which is happening through WhatsApp University.
That's right. Correct.
These WhatsApp University and Facebook University graduates are doing much more harm.
Correct.
So the only one you could cut to is through your proper information, through your editorials from your newspapers. Intellectual activism is something which is required. Once that intellectual activism comes, you don't have to tell people what are your needs, how you are going to sustain. Automatically they will fall into place. So today our leaders are hesitant to listen to questions. You try to question them and they are scared of you. So, if we educate people enough, where we make them capable of asking pertinent questions to their leaders, pertinent questions to the government, pertinent questions to their MLAs, to the opposition, I think the system improves.
Prajwal, your comments, but one quick question. See, the issues, if we've seen in the last few elections, there are certain institutions and very, very respected institutions in Goa, okay, who have also kind of played a role in, I wouldn't say dabbling into politics or steering politics in a certain direction, through their discourses, through their preachings and so on and so forth. The issue is that even those institutions had great faith in a kind of a change happening and a society becoming better and politics change. Do you also feel that many of these institutions also misplace their faith in a particular political party which is leading them, which is completely leading them down the wrong path?
Yeah, I feel so that time and again, whenever there has been an agitation in Goa, at the end of that agitation or on the eve of the elections,
right,
we always hope to bring about a change. There would be some change in the mindset of the people.
Correct.
But then, of late, I have lost faith in that, because you find that activist is expected to do these things, fight for Goa,
correct,
and the people would go and elect the same people. So, like for example, like people would call me and tell, okay, their hill is being cut, why don't you do it? So you have voted for that person who is cutting the hill,
right,
okay, and he is patronizing that developer who's cutting the hill. But activists are expected to fight always. But then you go and vote for the same people. So I don't know. I feel media would play a very important role here. Media that is, very, I would say,
media should play a very
people,
proactive and aggressive role in this.
And
yes,
the
correct.
people,
yes.
the people should, I don't know when that realization will come that openly the politicians are cheating them, fooling them, making false promises, yet people vote them, and they have become so confident that they know that they would come back to power. So that somewhere that dent has to be made, and that, I don't know, the people, I don't know whether they, once again, I don't know, several times we have attempted this and we have failed, okay. Although the agitation might have been successful, but we have failed in bringing about a change. I'm not talking about whether BJP is good or
right.
Congress is good or whoever. People, those people, that first assembly I want to see again. That second assembly I want to see again, where the MLAs, the politicians, they were concerned about people, about Goa and the people. Now the politician, as Dr. Kamath has said, they are concerned about themselves, their political future. They are amassing wealth. They are totally...
No, here our religious institutions will have to play a major role.
Yes.
It requires a complete shift in their thinking also. Because constantly we have seen in Goa, our religious institutions have placed more thrust and more reliance on a particular party. And these people have defied them. Now what is happening currently, you have seen.
So what should happen now?
So now there has to be change in attitude. They will have to look for alternatives, because you cannot be trusting the same people who have defied your trust.
Now, before we'll take your points, but I'm just saying, if we look at we come back to the Congress party because they were the trigger for us to be here today. Okay. So the issue here is that how does one see this, what they have attempted to do? This is half murder. This is not full murder.
Yeah.
Okay. Or it's an attempt to murder case.
Attempt to murder.
Okay. Now, the attempt to murder, I would say, is as serious as...
It is attempt to murder democracy.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So, this attempt to murder situation, so obviously any crime needs a punishment.
Yeah.
Now, who will mete out the punishment? Only people can mete out the punishment.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, do you expect, or do you at least have faith in our society reacting, or our people reacting to TSEP? Do you feel that right now, do you feel hope that institutions, the polity, the people will all come together and say this much and no longer, or will they all get back to their own need and greed and allow this system to perpetrate?
See, in fact, what is happening today is only greed. They are only fulfilling their aspiration, personal aspiration. But as far as future is concerned, you were saying about the institutions. I think institutions will have to realize, after seeing whatever that is happening, how to go ahead. How to go ahead in a way where they can guide the people to be on the right track. Earlier, now as we were saying, because of the opposition parties, now I think the ruling dispensation also should be responsible, not to destroy the opposition parties.
Right.
Because opposition parties are the pillars of the democracy.
And this will come back to haunt them itself.
Haunt them
again.
again.
Correct.
Because no party will remain forever ruling in India. They have to be changed. There will be change as the time passes, as the motives change, as the perception change. So therefore, I think it is the responsibility of the ruling dispensation not to try to destroy the opposition, be it Congress or any other this thing. And in the same way, I think if any other party comes to power, they also should not try to destroy the opposition. As and when BJP might be in the opposition, which we cannot say today.
Well, I'm afraid we've really run out of time, but I'll just end with a few thoughts. See, there's this great saying or quote by Samuel Johnson, who said, "Politics is the last refuge of a scoundrel." Right. The sad part here is that that last is being replaced by first. Right. It is no longer a last refuge. But before we bring down our politicians, and of course they deserve it, let us also, when we are looking at a politician face up, let us also hold a mirror and realize who is behind that politician. If we are saying that it has become the first refuge of a scoundrel, we must also look at the people who are behind these politicians, because they cannot derive their strength from an empty space. They derive the strengths basically from their votes. That is the currency that they feed on to ensure that their futures are completely intact, and probably at the cost of yours. Because one must remember that a country without an opposition is also a country without the future. When you have laws being made, when you have policies that are anti-people, when you have the one dispensation steamrolling the other, whether it be the BJP and the Congress, then the future of not just you, but your children and your grandchildren are completely at stake. What is the India that they are looking forward to? And I think that is the core responsibility that people have. But I also feel that in this whole sea of sinners, there would definitely be a few saints who will be certainly floating around. And I think that's the only hope that we have. And these saints will have to come from the people, and people have to decide on it. I do not think hard laws and more deterrence and all that is, of course, those things will happen in society. But the deterrent has to come from the hearts of the people who actually say enough is enough. And we hope on that note and that spirit, we move ahead, keeping complete faith in our democracy and our systems, because hope is the only answer. Thank you so much.